Got it.
Yay. Okay, we're rolling. Okay, Martha, I think this first section is yours. If I'm going too fast or slow, just let me know and I'll click through as you go through.
Okay. All right. My name's Martha Mooneyhan, and I am going to talk to you about some macro trends and how they affect children's ministry. So, first, we're going to talk about what is a macro trend. So, a macro trend is just a directional shift that affects a large population and it lasts between 5 to 10 years. Next slide. Okay. Some examples of these would be changes in demographics or changes in technology. And we're going to talk about each one of these in detail. So change in demographics. So I went in two directions here. I learned that there has been a change in the American demographics as a whole. Millennials have become the largest generation in the workforce, and it used to be the Gen Xers. Um, there are more households that are multi generational, and that means that there's more people living in each household. The majority of children born and the majority of children in K through 12 schools are actually non-white children, and that's a shift from where it was, 20 to 30 years ago. And then more and more, the views on moral issues and social issues are becoming more and more liberal. Um, so that is, greatly affecting the people that come to our church. Next slide. All right. Have also been some changes in religious demographics. So 20 to 30 years ago, 90% of Americans would have classified themselves as Christians. Now, that might have meant something different to them than what we would say a Christian is. But if you ask them, are you a Christian? 90% of Americans would have said yes. But there has been a large decrease in that number. And Americans now, only 63% of Americans would say that they are Christians as of 2022. So church attendance among Americans is also steadily declining. Okay, next slide. All right. There have been changes in technology. So Americans are spending more time on smartphones. Um, and that is, even parents are spending the majority of their time on smartphones as well, which affects our children. Most Americans get their news from social media, whereas, 20 to 30 years ago, people were mostly getting their news from print or even, like TV news stations, but now almost everybody gets their news from social media. And also, children are spending more of their time on screens, which means they're spending less time interacting with each other, less time interacting with their parents, less time, doing imaginative play and things like that. So, how does this affect children's ministry? Well, the demographic changes. Children may not come to church consistently. We've discussed before in some of our classes that you might have a kid that comes once a month, or they might come every other week, or they might come once every 2 months, based on sports schedules and who they're living with and those kinds of things. And more of our children are coming from different ethnic backgrounds. So we may have, a more diverse group of children as opposed to having all the same. And then technology changes. Children may expose to more mature content at an earlier age. And so they may, be thinking of things differently than what they would have thought of 20 to 30 years ago. And they may not have as much parent involvement to help them process through the things that they're seeing or experiencing on a daily basis. So what can the church do? Well, we need to partner with parents and provide training, build relationships, and get them engaged in the children's ministry. We need to build intergenerational connections, thinking back to the fact that a lot of them may be living in a multi-generational home. We wouldn't want them to come to church and then all of a sudden be segregated from, those older generations. And so we need to engage them more, and build those connections throughout the church. We need to involve children in ministry opportunities. They're in the front lines of, the society today. And so we need to make sure that we are giving them opportunities and teaching them how to minister to those around them, and pull in and engage the people around them, and plan some ministry activities outside of Sunday morning. If sports and those kinds of things are taking over our Sundays, then maybe we need to plan some things on a different day of the week, that might pull in more people, and reach a different group of children than what we are getting on Sunday mornings. And then be sure that teaching materials encompass all ethnicities and family types. Like I said, we're having kids come from all different backgrounds. They have different family styles. They might be in a home with a single parent, or they might live in a home with multi generations, or things like that. They might be brown, they might be, any other color, and we need to make sure that our pictures and our teaching materials are not just depicting little white faces. So, and then there's where I got some of my information.
And now we are on to microtrends, which are so fun. Okay, we can go to the next slide for our definition. So microtrends are a little bit less short-lived. They're a little bit more short-lived than a macro trend. So the definition is as follows. They're cycles of short-lived trends that gain a high amount of attention in a fairly short period outside of traditional trend cycles. And then they fall off the grid and lose public relevance almost just as quickly. So these are short-lived things that are like super popular. They're all everybody's talking about, and then you never hear about them again, or hear about them way less. And so we can go to the next slide. So in general life, we can think about like TikTok dances or viral beauty products where, oh, you need this thing, and then by the next week it's onto another thing. But in the church world, we can think about certain curriculums. Even I think about COVID approaches to church, where thank goodness for most people that was short-lived. I know we all are in different contexts, and so that was longer than others. For us, it was a relatively short time, but I know for a lot of y'all, it was even more than a year. And so we think about like orange curriculum, where that was a big trend, where that's all everybody used, and then something new came out and we moved on to the next thing. Awana, I feel like that was bigger whenever I was younger, but there's some churches still chugging along with Awana, which is great. These are some things that I've noticed generally were micro trends, or even hi-fi right now is a big thing. If that stays relevant, I will be proven wrong. But so I'm sure something new is going to come out that more churches will use, which is not a bad thing. That's the thing about micro trends. Sorry, y'all, I'm out of breath. I got a 6.5-pound baby, 38 weeks pregnant and feeling it. Okay, so that's the thing about micro trends, is that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just things that, if not utilized well or upkept well, can be detrimental to the church. And so that's what I'll talk about in a minute. We can go to the next slide. So yes, micro trends can be super useful in a church that's wanting to adapt. Our world is constantly changing. We have micro trends, macro trends, and as Brianna's going to talk about, fads that plague us. And so we want to kind of keep our finger on the pulse to see what kids want, or more importantly, what they need, and families as well. And so to keep it refreshed on a consistent basis, micro trends can be great. They can be fun, but children also need consistency. And so whenever you try to hold on to those micro trends, maybe a curriculum worked really great for you at this one season, but as your demographics may change, as your church grows, or I hope not decreases, but yes. So make sure that you are constantly evaluating and reevaluating, because once you hang on to those things, or you just try to implement a trend just because the church down the street is doing it, then that can be detrimental to your ministry that you want to grow and you want to adapt. But as I'll talk about later, for our response, we need to be sure that it's going to be useful. It's going to be building up your community instead of just fun. We go to the next slide. So this quote just speaks to that. So in light of these changing societal trends that Martha talked about, and the different messages that are being told to our kids. I mean, if you're using Breaker Rock Beach, that could be a microtrend. Breaker Rock Beach VBS curriculum this summer, you know that we're trying to counter the messages that society is constantly trying to tell our kids, where it's just a little bit of truth in there, but filled with enough lies to where it brings them away from the truth of the gospel. And so to counter these things and to make sure that we're trying to keep up with the culture without conforming to the culture, we can't continue doing ministry the way we always have. We must find new ways to teach the truths of the gospel in a way that will make sense to the children of today. We can go to the next slide. So yes, this is our church response. So survey your context. We all have different contexts. Even within the same city, we have a different context, to evaluate the needs and the gaps that need to be filled. If you're already doing something well that a micro trend is addressing, but you're already serving your community well in that way, you don't need to buy the new curriculum. You don't need to do all of these things because you're already doing it well. But we're not going to do things just because we've always done it for the sake of doing it. So whether that's events, ministry approaches, curriculum, make sure that you survey your context first before making a decision, because as in the next bullet, we all have probably an available budget that may or may not be very big. And so if your budget is not where it needs to be to fill those needs with this certain micro trend going around, then we can be creative in doing something else or doing it in a different way. So also be in contact with other local churches, children's ministries, as well as others who are farther away, not to like steal their ideas, but just to see how they're best serving their community and a way that you could adapt it to your community or work together and partner with them to serve your community as a whole. Also, it's great to have friends who are doing in the trenches with you. And so, yes, constantly reevaluate your ministry approach. Is what you're doing lining up with your mission and your vision to reach families? And whatever's no longer viable or helping your ministry, if you bought into that micro trend and it was great, but it is out the door, it's done, don't hold on to it. You don't need to do that just because you did it and it worked once, but not again. We can cut that out for the sake of the kingdom. Even if it's one step at a time for those sacred cows, and we all have them, they're all different. I'm not going to say mine because this is being recorded. So yes, that is the micro trends portion of this presentation.
Okay, so hey, my name's Brianna, and I'm going to be talking about the fads. Fads were really difficult to research because the definition of a fad is something that is really short-lived and is not around very long. So it can be difficult to figure out what's going to be a fad and what may potentially stick around longer and become kind of more of a trend. But a fad in definition is a practice or interest followed for a time with exaggerated zeal. The difference between a fad and a movement is that a movement produces long-term enduring change, and a fad, on the other hand, feeds off of something that already exists, a cultural awareness, a disenchantment, or even a novel idea, and expands on it. And so something that you'll see throughout the rest of the presentation about fads is that they are sort of a subset of the trends that are already going on within the church. And they kind of feed off of things that are already happening at your church. So here we're going to talk about fads in children's ministry are usually not completely separated from current larger trends within the church culture. They are the result of zeroing in on a particular activity with great zeal. And of course, as we've said, fads don't last very long, but some of the trends that have spawned them may be longer lived within the church. So just because one specific fad that you tried or that seemed like everybody was trying, everybody was jumping onto, doesn't work out, doesn't mean that the trend at large has to be something that you discontinue. Maybe you can try a different method, a different curriculum, but something similar may work better. I like to think of fads as a subsection of church trends that reflect the larger trends at hand. And fads are basically, we said they don't occur in a vacuum. They're birthed out of what is happening, but they tend to fail a couple of tests. The ones that I looked at and the research I saw showed that the reason that these kind of fizzle out really quickly is that they fail the test of sustainability, reproducibility, or effectiveness in the church. And we see this a lot. There's, kind of catchy things that it seems like everybody's trying and we jump in, and then it's like, is this really something that our ministry can reproduce over a long term? Does it fit the long-term goals of the church? Is it reproducible? Is it financeable? And is it effective? And that's a big thing with fads. I think that last one, the effectiveness, ends up being the killer for a lot of them, I think. So one of the fads that I saw, and I know everybody remembers this from when we were kids, acronyms were on everything. So the usage itself of Christian acronyms, as you can see here, has been around since the very beginning of the New Testament church. Since the beginning of the Christian era, followers of Jesus have used acronyms as a way of sharing about their faith. We know about the Ixus, the Greek fish, that people would put it outside their homes, and that was kind of a symbol for what they believed as a family. And sometimes if they had like a house church, they would have the fish symbol there. And so that's kind of been around forever. But where we have the fads come in is that a lot of these acronyms are very short-lived. They pop up and they're everywhere and they're on everything, and then they disappear really quickly. Some of these I know like the fully rely on God, we saw a lot when I was a kid. And these are some of the bottom ones here, are some newer ones, the swag, saved with amazing grace, things like that. Were just sort of a fad to put those on everything. And I think that when we look at that one, it goes back to, is this reproducible to continue to put these on everything? And so that one has sort of fizzled out. Another fad that I saw was when we talk about dramas and skits within the church, those have been around forever. I mean, I know even back when I was a kid, people would put on skits and plays at their church. But at one point in the 90s, apparently it was a very big trend to have this specific play company come in. It was a professional organization that would come in and perform this play called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames within the church. Now, the problem with it was, and I think why it ended up kind of being a fad, is that it was not reproducible. The church members were not able to reproduce this for their church congregation. This is a one-time thing that a company would come in, put on this production, and then they're gone. And I think it was an aim at being integrated for all ages. And if you saw some clips from this, you would think, no, probably not. So that has kind of passed on. And I think now we've kind of taken, instead of hiring a company to come in, I don't see churches do that much anymore. I think we've moved to, if we're going to use dramas and skits, it being something we do in-house so that we can reproduce it for children. It can be something that we can use long-term. The character craze, I know Dr. Peavy has talked about the VeggieTales group some, and you can see some of the other ones here, Bible Man. This little funny character in the bottom is called Jot, and I don't know if y'all have ever heard of him. He was like this little animated dot way back in like the 60s that would share like biblical character. And you had Salty the Songbook here. And so no, these are not something new. Again, it's been a long time trend to have characters, these animated characters that will talk about biblical stories and biblical topics and character. And so that has been around forever. But where we really see a fad come in is that we probably within the last 10 to 20 years saw a fad where churches were using these video programs to show Bible curriculum within the church. And so rather than having a teaching curriculum where you would go through and talk about different Bible stories or different biblical concepts, they would have like the VeggieTale videos or the Bible Man videos. And that would be for especially the younger age group and the preschool ministry, what they would show the kids. And that was it. And I think that thankfully has kind of faded out, as well as we've seen, when we go back to our test of why these trends don't last, one of those things was effectiveness. And I think that that's kind of where this one falls. And it's okay. It's just not as effective as us interpersonally telling the children stories, and especially showing them even just images, even animated images of people, so that they understand that these stories really happened. They weren't, as Dr. Peavy, I think it was her niece, she said, thought that Goliath was a giant pickle. A more recent one that I saw was the drive-through VBS. This is something that we saw come about with 2020 and COVID. I know Taylor mentioned that a lot of churches had to, we had to adjust. And this was something that some churches offered. There were other things that some churches had kits that people would pick up. Some VBS was done completely online. We just had some different things. And the reason that I think that they're a fad is that most churches don't want to do this consistently. They don't want to switch to only having drive-through VBS or all completely online VBS. And so we saw this serve a specific purpose for a specific season, but maybe it's not, I don't think it's going to be a long-term trend that this is where we want to be as churches. Under this section, how should the church respond to fads? And I echo a lot of what Taylor said with the micro trends, that there's so many things out there that the church ministers can jump onto. And I think you have to be really careful not to jump onto every single fad. Doing that can drain your church resources. It can diminish your finances. It can distract from the focus of your ministry. And I like this quote here. It says, "It takes a savvy person to distinguish the difference between a passing fad that will waste your time and a bigger trend that could rattle the very foundations of your ministry." I have some questions on this next page that I think are beneficial to children's ministers in evaluating whether trends are going to be a fad or if they're potentially going to be something that will serve the purpose of the church long term. Some of these questions are, does this idea align with and aid in the long-term vision for our ministry? Is it reproducible? Is it sustainable? Is it effective in teaching what we have as a vision for our ministry that we're going to be teaching? And our third thing is, has it been tested elsewhere by other churches, and what are their results? When you're talking about a fad, those don't stick around very long, and there's a reason they don't stick around very long. So when you are able to look at other churches that have tried these things and are able to see their results from those, even just that is going to be a good example to you that this may be more than just some crazy fad that we're stepping into. This may be something that it's got some weight behind it. It's got some research behind it. It has been shown to add this to the church ministry. And so when we're able to see that and see results, that can kind of help you to avoid just jumping on something the first time that you see it. Okay, so we are going to transition. We have a video that we want to share with y'all. So let me close out our Google slide here, and we're going to pull up our video. Martha, Taylor, y'all give me a thumbs up. Can y'all see that okay? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit play here on our video. And this is just talking about some current trends that we're seeing in children's ministry right now.
For a way to get your dads involved. And a lot of them are never going to step in front of a classroom with a teacher manual, but they will join a security team. I see more and more KidMin leaders are not sticking with one curriculum. They're switching around, and not even because they're dissatisfied with the curriculum as much as they want to switch it up. They just want to switch it up. And even churches that have a denominational publishing house aren't being loyal to the denomination publishing house. They are trying different things, and they may try something for 6 months and then move and do this for the summer, then do something for this quarter. And personally, they're probably flip sides of the coin. Part of me really loves that because as a pastor, I mean, no senior pastor is going to say, okay, this is my 3-year. Maybe I shouldn't say no. I would think most senior pastors aren't going to have somebody feed them their 3 years worth of sermons, because my church, who knows what my church is going through and what the needs of my congregation are and what's surfacing. And so I like it that with KidMin leaders, they're trying to actually pick up on, hey, what are the needs of these kids? And maybe I need to adjust the curriculum accordingly. Flip side of the coin is, I think with kids, a curriculum is important because the curriculum is your roadmap. And it is a way to help you make sure that A, B, C, D, E, F, and G are all getting covered in this amount of time. So there's flip sides of the coin, but it is a trend I see. Another trend I see, this isn't new in the last couple of months, but I would say in the last year or two, and that is a super, super, super heightened increase in security and safety precautions when it comes to kid ministry. Not just running background checks on volunteers, but even like, hey, are we really taking this check-in, check-out thing seriously? Do we have evacuation plans? Do we have a lockdown plan? A lot of churches have security teams, which is a great way for you to get dads involved if you are looking for a way to get your dads involved. And a lot of them are never going to step in front of a classroom with a teacher manual, but they will join a security team. So I've seen a lot more security team. Even churches are bringing in armed security people or an off-duty police officer or something just to be there. But increase in security. Speaking of security, here's another one I'm not sure that I like, but it is a reality. And that is I'm picking up on a growing fear of men serving in children's ministry. And I believe it's probably because that most sexual crimes are committed by men. And so there is a weariness about men being back with kids. And I hate that because, hey, I'm a guy, Nick, you're a guy. Some of the best volunteers in my church are guys. But it's I think with a lot of moms and a lot of churches, when they look at life, they're like, man, is it smart for us to have kids back or men back here with the kids? Now, I think it's totally fine. I think you need to be screening everybody. You need to background check everybody, and you need to routinely background check everybody. Don't background check somebody and let a decade go by before you screen them again. Routinely check these people, and then you can be smart about this, Nick. Like, I would never put two men in a classroom together by themselves, even if they're your best men, even if they have cleared a background check. A mom, especially a new mom, if she brings her kids to a class and there's two men, it's going to create some anxiety. Maybe not to all moms, but to some moms, that's going to seem a little weird. So you got to do two adults in the room, and I would not do two men in the room. So I think it's something for us just to be aware of, Nick, that there is an increasing fear of men serving in kids ministry.
All right. Martha, Taylor, do y'all have anything else that you want to add here before we wrap up our video? All right. Thanks, y'all, for joining us. I hope that you learned some about current trends in children's ministry from us.